I was fired by a young CEO who believed I was an outdated obstacle to her grand corporate transformation. What she did not know was that 850 trucks, 285 warehouses, and a credit line worth tens of millions were all breathing through one thing: my authentication. 15 minutes after I walked out, the entire empire began to lock itself down. I knew the axe was hanging over me the day Olivia Mercer, the 26-year-old CEO of Great Plains Industrial Transport, and had the solid oak conference table removed and replaced with a circle of purple meditation cushions. She called it an equal dialogue space. I called it a room full of adults trying to negotiate steel freight contracts while sitting cross-legged on pillows that squeaked every time someone shifted. My name is Evelyn Harper. I had been running operations at Great Plains for 17 years. I did not learn logistics from polished slides or trendy professional networking phrases. I learned it from oil stains, forklift alarms, freezing concrete floors, and midnight calls from warehouses where one broken scanner could derail an entire route. Olivia did not see any of that. She saw glass walls, collaboration apps, brand colors, and slogans about transformation. I thought she would irritate a few old managers, confuse a few teams, and eventually learn that logistics does not run on inspiration. I underestimated the confidence of someone who had never slept on a folding cot inside a warehouse to keep a distribution line alive. When she started calling people like me legacy, I understood that I was no longer a leader in her eyes. I was an obstacle, and obstacles, in her world, were meant to be removed. I entered this industry at 23, holding a clipboard, wearing safety shoes that blistered my heels, and still needing someone to tell me which end of a forklift not to stand in front of. I had no family name, opening conference room doors. I had no expensive vocabulary to make ordinary work sound visionary. I moved from warehouse to warehouse, learning dock layouts, shift rhythms, scanner errors, weather failures, and the little mechanical betrayals that never appeared in executive dashboards. Before Great Plains, I worked at 3 different logistics companies. By the time Walter Mercer hired me, I already knew operations was not a chart. It was a living body. A small failure in Milwaukee could become an angry customer in Detroit by morning. Over 17 years, I became the person who kept 285 warehouses across 12 states moving in rhythm. I knew which truck died most often in Nebraska, which hub needed spare parts before winter, and which route should never be reassigned on a Friday. During the blizzard of 2018, I slept 3 nights on a cot in the Milwaukee warehouse because the backup generators required a manual restart and no one else knew the sequence. My lower back has reminded me of that every morning since. Olivia looked at my file and saw a woman too rigid for the future. I looked at every ache in my body and saw receipts for loyalty. Olivia called me into her office at 1:15 on a Wednesday afternoon. She called the glass room a transparency pod. To me, it was an expensive box that smelled like essential oils and burnt coffee. She sat behind a reclaimed bamboo desk in a blazer made from recycled plastic, hands pressed together as if she were about to guide me through a corporate breathing exercise. She slid a printed document toward me. It had colorful arrows, vague labels, and a chart without numbers. "Evelyn," she said, with a softness that felt almost rehearsed, "we have completed a deep assessment of the company's energy flow. Your management style is heavily legacy-based. It no longer aligns with our collaborative optimization pivot." I looked at the page, then at here. I had heard plenty of nonsense in business, but rarely nonsense dressed that well. I asked directly, "You are firing me because of my management style." Olivia smiled and corrected me, as if I had used the wrong word in a wellness seminar. "It is not termination. It is realignment. If you have ever had someone use beautiful language to disguise a ruthless decision..." Comment number 1. "So, I know you understand that feeling." I was not angry yet. Something inside my chest simply went cold. The way it does when you realize the person across from you has just pulled the pin from a grenade and has no idea what she is holding. I looked at the wall clock. 1:15 in the afternoon. That mattered far more than Olivia understood. Every day, at 1:30. The central inventory system at Great Plains ran an authentication protocol. To an outsider, that might sound like routine security. To this company, it was a heartbeat. It confirmed what each warehouse held, what each truck carried, which routes required updates, and which raw data needed to be cleaned before being sent to banks, warehouses, and dispatch. That protocol required my biometric access, not the CEO's, not the new administrators. Mine, my fingerprint, my hardware token, and the patched commands I had built over years to keep an old system from eating the company alive. Without authentication, the system did not wait politely for an explanation. It assumed intrusion. It froze shipping manifests, disconnected lender feeds, locked equipment, suspended dispatch logic, and left 850 trucks stranded in operational uncertainty. I told Olivia, "Fine. You want new energy. You are about to get it." I stood up without yelling. I took my security badge from my jacket, the badge with higher operational clearance than hers, and placed it on her bamboo desk. "You have 15 minutes. She blinked. 15 minutes for what I said. Before the ghost in the machine realizes I am gone. Olivia laughed, but the sound was thin and dry, like a hinge that needed oil. She told me I was exaggerating, that her new technology team had assured her everything had been moved to a modern platform. I asked, "You mean the 3 boys you hired because their profiles said blockchain?" She did not like that. I did not need her to like it. I explained one last time. As the woman who had kept the system alive, the legacy platform she hated was held together by 20-year-old code. 3 backup servers in a Kansas City basement, and a personal authentication chain that could not be replaced by a few slides. If I did not approve the 130 sync, the system would treat the absence as a hostile takeover. It would lock data flows, cut lender connections, irase usable manifests, and stall the trucks, as if someone had switched off the whole network. Olivia looked at me like I was a middle-aged woman clinging to the past to scare younger leadership. She did not understand that I was not threatening her. I was reading the manual for a bomb I had built years earlier, so the company would survive. If this story is worth following, please like the video. Because from that moment on, everything began falling, according to its own logic. I turned and walked out. Behind me, Olivia still had the smile of someone who believed power lived in the title on the glass door. I walked past the open office, where young employees leaned over monitors with headsets on, typing into applications they believed had replaced experience. A giant wall mural read, "Move fast and build things." I almost laughed. Moving fast was easy. Building something that could bear weight was the hard part. The elevator ride down from the 35th floor took 40 seconds. That was enough time for 17 years to run through my mind. Thanksgiving dinners I missed because a Memphis distribution hub lost its scanners. A fishing trip with my brother I canceled in 2019 because the Kansas City server room flooded during a long weekend. And I was the only one who knew where the manual override panel was hidden. My knees cracked whenever it rained because I had walked concrete floors for 72 straight hours during the winter of 2018. I had done it because the company needed it. Drivers needed routes. Customers needed deliveries. For years, I thought that was duty. When the elevator doors opened, I no longer felt duty. I felt like someone just removed from a system everyone assumed ran itself. At the security desk, Dale Ramsey looked up from his crossword. "Leaving early." "Ms. Evelyn," I placed the company credit card on his desk. "Permanent vacation." "Dale." "Olivia thinks I am bad for the energy." He shook his head. "This place will fall apart without you," I said. "Give it about 15 minutes. I was still in the parking garage when my phone buzzed for the first time. Alert system sync authorization missing. Warehouse 117. Warehouse 118. Warehouse 119. The list kept sliding down the screen, like a crack spreading across glass. It was 1:31 in the afternoon. I sat in my old Ford F-150, a truck that had survived enough road salt to season a factory of pretzels, and watched the alerts stack up. Strangely, I did not feel victorious. I did not even feel angry anymore. I felt like a demolition engineer watching a timer hit zero from a safe distance. Buildings do not fall because people are emotional. They fall because someone removes the wrong load-bearing beam. Olivia did not understand logistics. It was not a spreadsheet. It was a nervous system. Warehouses. Scanners. Forklifts. Drivers. Banks. Manifests. Route. And contracts were all connected by invisible joints. Pull out one piece that looks small, and the whole machine does not slow down. It seizes. The first thing to die was inventory visibility. My authentication did not only open the sink, it triggered scripts that scrubbed raw scanner data before it reached the main server. Without them, the system swallowed the dirty feed, directly duplicate reads, corrupted timestamps, misread pallets, broken identifiers. The system saw unverified data and did exactly what it had been designed to do. It quarantined everything. In plain English, every item the company owned had just vanished from the digital books. I could picture it happening across the states. A sales rep in Detroit entering a code for 2,000 units of industrial welding equipment, hitting enter, and seeing zero available stock. He would spin in his chair and say he had counted 5 pallets that morning. He would try again. Unknown location. Missing status. And speaking of what comes next, if you want more office stories where the person everyone underestimated turns out to be holding the whole system together, we subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next one. Because one item in Detroit was only a speck inside the storm, multiply it by 285 warehouses. Multiply it by thousands of stock codes, tens of thousands of pallets, and hundreds of active routes. Every record became zero or unknown. As if someone had shut off the lights inside a company moving $800 million in freight each year. The operations group chat had not removed me yet. So the messages began exploding. Peter Rowe asked why Chicago was showing no inventory. Wendy Brooks in Iowa said the scanners were locked. Drivers were backed up to the highway. And one of them was threatening to call his union representative. Richard Blake, board chairman, typed, "Someone get Evelyn Harper on the phone right now." Olivia followed with, "Who has Evelyn's override code? Bring it in immediately." I stared at that line and breathed out. Override code. They thought 17 years of experience was a string of characters on a sticky note beside a coffee mug. There was no override code in the way they imagined. Emergency access was not a number to guess or a manual a consultant could read in one afternoon. It was knowing that the scanner at Bay 12 of the Texas hub double red on Tuesday afternoons because sunlight hit the west-facing loading door at the wrong angle. So, counts needed an 8% correction. It was a command script I wrote in 2012 and buried in a directory structure no one had opened in years. It was knowing which alerts were noise and which meant a driver might spend the night outside Amarillo with refrigerated medical equipment and no dispatcher able to reach him. They had not fired an employee. They had pulled the pin on a grenade and handed it to people who did not know what a grenade was. But disappearing inventory was not the worst part. The real problem was money. Great Plains operated on a $45 million revolving credit line. The lender's algorithm pinged our inventory database every hour to verify collateral. As long as goods existed on the books, borrowing capacity remained. If inventory dropped below a threshold, the credit line froze automatically. No phone call. No meeting. The algorithm simply closed the door. By 2 in the afternoon, our inventory did not fall below the threshold. It hit zero. According to every connected system, Great Plains owned nothing but a 35-story glass building and a very expensive collection of meditation cushions. I imagined the 35th floor at that moment. Olivia's real-time profit dashboard, the one she showed board visitors like a personal invention, was probably flashing red. Not soft warning red, full cardiac failure red. Marcus Reed from Field Operations was probably asking why the Gulf Hub showed negative stock, a number the system was never supposed to generate. Linda Hayes in Finance was likely shouting that the lender portal had triggered covenant warnings and needed a senior leader on the call immediately. Olivia. I guessed. I would say what people who do not understand systems always say, restart the servers. But you cannot reboot a void. You cannot restart a data famine. At 2:15, the automated dispatch system activated its own logic. If inventory showed 0, all trucks were presumed empty. If trucks were presumed empty, standing orders required them to return to base. The system did not know the trucks were full. It did not know one was headed to a hospital in Cincinnati, another to a Denver construction site, and others toward factories in Detroit. It saw empty and issued recall. 850 trucks began turning around on highways across 12 states. As I merged onto the interstate, the traffic report mentioned unusual congestion around the industrial corridor. I turned the volume up slightly. On the 35th floor, Olivia was learning her first real lesson. Modern platforms do not run on vibes. They run on old pipes someone has been quietly maintaining. My phone rang. Olivia Mercer, CEO. I let it ring 4 times and declined. It rang again. I declined again. Then a voicemail appeared. I played it. Not because I was curious, but because sometimes you need to hear the voice of arrogance when it begins to crack. Evelyn. This is Olivia. There appears to be a minor synchronization issue with our data flow. We need your access credentials as soon as possible. This behavior is unprofessional. If you do not respond in 5 minutes, I will contact legal. You cannot hold company assets hostage. Company assets. I nearly laughed. Those assets were a cognitive map of 17 years of problems stored inside my head. She could not subpoena my memory. She could not audit institutional knowledge with a form. She could not place a lien on 17 winters of showing up when nobody else wanted to come in. I had stolen nothing. I simply was no longer being paid to keep their world from collapsing. And since they were so confident I was obsolete, I decided to let the future introduce itself. I drove west. There was only one person who would understand exactly what had happened without needing me to translate it into executive language. Walter Mercer, founder of Great Plains. Olivia's father. The man who built the company from 2 trucks, a small workshop, and handshakes heavy enough to replace contracts. If anyone still knew that operations was the spine and not a support department, it was him. Walter's place was not a showy vacation mansion. It was a cedar and stone house outside Rockford, overlooking a wide bend of the Rock River. Before Great Plains had its first contract, he had built a workshop on that land. From there, the company began with 2 trucks, a wall of tools, and a handshake deal with a steel distributor in Gary, Indiana. Walter was 74. With a face carved by hard years and eyes sharper than most people in the glass conference rooms downtown. He retired 3 years earlier and left the board 1 sheet of paper. It had 1 paragraph: operations runs itself. Evelyn Harper runs operations. Keep your hands out of what works. The board obeyed for 14 months before Olivia arrived with her transformation roadmap. When I pulled up, Walter was on the porch, slowly sharpening a pocket knife. He looked at me, then at the knife, then back at me. You are supposed to be in the 130 sink. I leaned on the rail. I got realigned. My operational frequency does not match the collaborative pivot. His hand stopped. He set the knife down with the care of a man deciding what to pick up next. She fired you on a Wednesday. Right before the sink, I said. Olivia called it realignment. Walter closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. When he opened them, there was no confusion left. Walter went inside and came back with a bottle of bourbon and 2 glasses. Noiche. He poured mine first. Then his. I gave him the short version. The lender was flagging covenant violations. 850 trucks had received recall orders at 2:15. And the traffic report had already noticed. Walter took a drink and looked at the river. After a moment, he told me about missing his niece's rehearsal dinner in 2011 because he drove 6 hours to Columbus when a backup server room lost power and nobody knew where the manual battery lever was. He had crawled into the equipment room wearing the dress shirt he was supposed to wear to dinner. Then he looked at me. I built that company with blood and bad knees. My daughter just fired, the only woman who knows where everybody is buried because she did not like the way you ran meetings. He picked up an old flip phone from the side table. Not the smartphone his assistant had set up, but the one he kept for situations that mattered. I asked who he was calling. Richard Blake. Then the bank. Then my lawyer. When the line connected, his voice did not get louder. It got heavier. Like a steel door closing. Richard. It is Walter. Stop whatever you are doing. My daughter just pulled authentication out of a system that 285 warehouses depend on and handed the keys to nobody. Walter refused to be transferred to Olivia. He said Olivia was the reason he was calling. Then he looked at me as he said the next line. There is exactly one person on this planet who can restore that system tonight. She is sitting on my porch, drinking my bourbon, and looking at the river. 10 minutes later, the emergency board line opened. Richard Blake came on with the voice of a man who had been through 4 consecutive calls, full of shouting. He said the situation was deteriorating by the minute. The lender was threatening a formal review, and field managers were calling in from 9 states. I said, "That sounds rough. Richard, I am having a peaceful afternoon out here." He said they needed my authentication token and override access immediately. I reminded him I no longer worked for Great Plains. Olivia had realigned me. If they wanted me back, we needed to discuss what preparedness really looked like. Walter nodded once, slowly and clearly, like a general giving permission to fire. I gave my first condition: I would not return as operations manager. I would return as vice president of operations, reporting directly to the board. My salary would triple from $120,000 to $360,000 a year, with a 12-month contract paid up front upon signing. Richard began to object. I cut him off. 850 trucks are on highways, and the lender algorithm already sees 0 collateral. Do you want to negotiate compensation? Or do you want freight moving again? The silence on the other end lasted long enough for me to know they were swallowing their pride. Finally, Richard agreed. I gave the second condition, full operational autonomy. No transformation roadmaps imposed from above. No agile consultant. No dashboard recommendations from people who had never spent a night in a warehouse. My team would return immediately: Peter Rowe, Wendy Brooks, and the others who had been pointlessly reassigned. Each would receive a 30% raise and written board acknowledgement that their reassignments had been operationally unsound. I heard muffled discussion, rapid typing, and then Richard agreed. The third condition was the real blade. I let a beat pass before speaking. Olivia could keep her title if the board wanted to protect the family's image, but she would have no operational authority over my division. No emails to my team about process. No warehouse walks with shallow suggestions. No articles about artificial intelligence disruption forwarded to my department heads. She could handle strategy, investor relations, brand partnerships. Whatever made her feel modern, operations would be completely off limits. Richard said carefully. She is family. Evelyn. This is delicate. Walter leaned toward the phone. She is a liability. Richard. Either you restructure her role tonight, or at 9 tomorrow morning, I call my broker and begin unwinding my 38% stake. By noon, you will hate the market board. What followed was the silence of people doing math they disliked but could not dispute. Richard finally agreed. Olivia would be moved to strategic partnerships and fully separated from operations. I knew that sentence hurt them. Not because they pitied Olivia, but because they had just admitted that a young woman handed a throne had nearly burned down the castle. Richard asked when I could be on site. I told him I was about 2 hours away, and the system would remain locked until I walked through the door, authenticated in person, and told their technology team to stay away from the override directory. I made it clear that if anyone forced access with the wrong credentials, the system could trigger a full database wipe. 17 years of inventory history, calibration records, and routing data would vanish permanently. I could not restore what no longer existed. This time, the line went so quiet that I could hear the wind on Walter's porch. Richard said, "Understood. Please. Evelyn. Every minute is costing money." I said, "I know. I have been calculating it for 17 years. I required wet signatures and a faxed copy sent to Walter's machine before I left the porch." After I hung up, Walter poured the last bourbon into both glasses, set the empty bottle on the rail, and said, "Vice President of Operations, you should have held out for COO." I raised my glass. One thing at a time. We sat there for 90 minutes. Long enough for the board to sweat through their shirts, and for lawyers to write power back into clauses they had thought they could strip from me with a meaningless page. Walter's old Panasonic fax machine, the one Olivia had once called charmingly retro at Christmas dinner, began whining and pushing out 4 pages of binding terms. Walter read every line, made 2 calls to his lawyer, marked 3 places, and signed the bottom. I read every line twice. I did not read like someone eager to return. I read like someone finally seeing her value written in ink instead of paid in thank yous for sacrifice. Outside, the river kept moving, indifferent to the disaster unfolding miles away. The sky turned the orange-gray of a Midwestern October evening. When the air is cold enough to show your breath, but not cold enough to make you go inside. I remembered the Milwaukee warehouse in February 2018. On the second night beside a generator the size of a pickup truck. I called my brother just to hear a human voice that was not a forklift alarm. He asked when I was coming home. I told him I did not know. The company needed the warehouse online. Drivers needed routes. 400 families needed freight delivered. He asked, "Does the company know you are doing this?" I had no good answer then. I did now. I signed Evelyn Harper at the bottom, pressing hard enough to almost cut through the paper. Not because I wanted revenge, because for the first time in 17 years, I was not asking the company to see me. I was forcing it to look. I pulled into the Great Plains parking lot at 8:47 that evening. The building was lit from the first floor to the 35th, like a fire drill. Nobody had remembered to end. 2 black sedans with out-of-state plates sat near the entrance. Lender representatives. Most likely, they had come to watch the company be rescued or to record its collapse in person. Dale Ramsey was still at the security desk. When he saw me come through the revolving doors, he actually stood. "Welcome back, Ms. Evelyn," I said. "Temporary or permanent? 30 seconds will tell." The elevator opened on the 35th floor, and I recognized the smell immediately: cold coffee, stressed people, and the stale air of an office where no one had opened a window in hours. Every conference room was lit. The open floor looked busy, but it was disaster busy. The kind where everyone is doing something to avoid feeling helpless while the real problem remains untouched. Peter Rowe waited beside the elevator. He looked like a man who had watched a house burn from across the street all afternoon. Knowing exactly where the extinguisher was and being forbidden to use it, he said quietly, "You are a legend." I said, "Monday morning? Bring Wendy. Tell the others?" He had already texted them. Richard Blake met me at the server room door with the contract folder and the face of a man who had learned a lesson so expensive he intended never to repeat it. Richard handed me the folder and said the documents were executed and the first quarter advance had cleared. I did not rush into the role of savior. I opened the signature page, checked the compensation clause, checked the autonomy provision, and checked the section separating Olivia from my division. Everything was there. Only then did I sit at the primary authentication terminal. The screen was a wall of red lock errors, suspended indicators, warning codes stacked like an open wound. Each line represented a warehouse, a hub, or a dispatch center frozen since 1:31 in the afternoon. 7 hours and 16 minutes. I took the hardware token from my keychain, the same keychain I had carried for 11 years. The token, Olivia's cloud-native team apparently never knew existed. I entered my username, typed my password, and placed my finger on the biometric reader. Authentication confirmed. Inventory sync began. Warehouse data reconciled. Lender portal feed restored. Truck dispatch routing updated. 45 seconds later, the red drained from the screen like blood returning to the body. Green across the board. 285 warehouses. 12 states. The entire room exhaled at once, like a pressure valve finally opening after a long day. Phones began ringing everywhere: field managers, drivers, dispatchers, all reconnecting at the same time. It was the sound of a company remembering how to breathe. I removed the token, clipped it back onto my keychain, and stood. I told Richard the trucks would receive updated routing within 90 seconds. The lender portal would show full collateral restoration within the hour. And Peter Rowe and the full operations team would return Monday morning. I wanted my old desk, a real chair, and a coffee machine that served actual caffeine instead of brown perfume. I looked around the room once more and added, and the meditation cushions are gone before I walk in at 7 in the morning. I headed for the elevator. Richard called after me and asked where I was going. I said, steak dinner. I have been thinking about it since 1:30. The doors closed. Somewhere on that floor, Olivia Mercer was probably sitting inside her glass room, learning the most expensive lesson of her career. Some things cannot be realigned. Some systems do not run on vision decks, transformation roadmaps, or recycled plastic blazers. Some systems run on 17 years of showing up when no one else knows what to do. The most dangerous person in an organization is not the loudest one in the room. It is the person quietly holding the pieces together while knowing exactly what will happen if she lets go. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story made you think, please leave one like, subscribe to the channel, and remember that real power is not always written on the nameplate outside the door. Sometimes it lives in the person who knows which bolt is keeping the whole machine from collapsing.